Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Diana, and I am the Head of Research and Sustainability at Global Blockchain Business Council. It is my pleasure today to introduce you and welcome you to our virtual members forum on how to transform enterprise data into smart data through blockchain. This is a bi-weekly webinar showcasing the innovative work of our members around the world. And today we are joined by Matthijs de Vries, CEO and founder of Nuklai. He goes by Matt also. The global industry and most enterprises share a common problem today. They are sitting on a wealth of untapped data potential. During our webinar today on how to transform enterprise data into smart data through blockchain, Matt will walk us through the complexities of the issue, as well as demonstrate how we can not only activate this untapped potential, but also make this data smart. We will then discuss how the smart data can spearhead a new era of innovation through collaboration, generate new revenue streams, and enable experimentation with AI technology. Just briefly, before we begin, I would also like to introduce Matthijs. Matthijs is a serial entrepreneur with a passion for blockchain technology as well as its role in the future of data and AI. He is currently building the collaborative smart data ecosystem and decentralized data infrastructure provider, Nuklai. With extensive experience in DeFi and Web3, Matthijs is also one of the co-founders of tokenization infrastructure expert Nexera, which also known as AllianceBlock, DeFi trading strategy software provider Nuant, and also he's a strategic advisor for the smart wallet project Brillion. We welcome your questions at any point during today's presentation. Please submit them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will take them after the presentation. So thank you, Matthijs, Matt, for joining us, and I will now hand things over to you to begin.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and super excited to be here today. So let me immediately dive right into it and share my screen. I will talk today about how to transform enterprise data into smart data through blockchain. And that's a lot of buzzwords already. So let's start a little bit with real world problems. Like what are we actually talking about? I think if I go back to last year when I briefly attended Plug and Play's Silicon Valley Winter Summit, I heard a talk from the Plug and Play analyst saying that last year alone in 2023, right, 6,000 new startups were created that do something with AI. And usually they leverage AI. They take mostly LLMs nowadays, large language models, and leverage this for a solution in some kind of niche, which can be animal health, which can be HR, travel, insurance, etc. And that's all cool. And this year there will be way more than 6,000. There will be maybe 7,000 more startups created to do something around AI. But I see a big problem. All these startups, all these solutions, all this technology need data, and they need more data from all the solutions that were already built so far, all the infrastructure that's already there doesn't necessarily take care of sufficient data. And even more so, if you look at the problems that are discussed today with OpenAI when it introduced ChatGPT, was that data fairly sourced, right? You saw New York Times suing OpenAI for using its news articles for training its models. So we need to do better. So that's why we come with a kind of an end-to-end infrastructure that's focused on everything around data. So it's so easy to say, like, we have data here and we have data there, and we just bring it together, and then we create new innovation on top of that data, or we create new kind of AI models on top of that data. But I think most organizations that deal with data, and virtually every organization deals with data, of course, they know how difficult it is to leverage existing data, because there are a couple of problems. Data that within an organization is usually stored in many different formats, in many different sources, different kind of databases. So just bringing that data, even inside of a single organization, together into one is already very challenging. So we are focusing on these kind of problems where data is in different formats, in different places, and is where the data governance is difficult or hard to get right. And for that, we are seeing a lot of different challenges as well when it comes to innovation, because you have regulations when you want to collaborate with other organizations on data, especially when it comes to organization needs to do reporting around data for suppliers that they work with, clients that they work with. So we're not even talking about innovation, just the fact that they have to do something around data and collaborate with other organizations around that data. Bringing that data together and retaining your governance is very complicated. Want to do a collaboration with different other organizations around data, you will need to figure out which organization inside of a consortium or a cooperation is going to run or be responsible for the infrastructure where that data is going to be processed on or is going to be ingested on. So there is, problem on top of problem that makes it hard to bring this data into any kind of next step or next generation of innovation. And therefore, we have been working on something that we call non-intrusive infrastructure. And what that essentially means is that we bring through a virtual layer data supply together with data and demand and make it easy to collaborate together on top of that data. And I will go, of course, in deep detail on what that exactly means. What Nuklai essentially is building is a network that allows you to get started on any type of data innovation, collaboration, or monetization without having to deploy new infrastructure, without having to actually move your data outside of your own service to be able to collaborate with others. Everyone can keep doing what they are doing on their existing technologies without having to go through costly projects to update everything or generalize everything, and or running shared infrastructure together, which is very important if you want to collaborate between different companies in a trustless way. So a virtual layer is essentially a decentralized network of orchestration and a decentralized network of distributed clusters that's responsible for execution. So still, I will go in detail to what that really means, but let's first take a step back and see like how Nuklai helps through a step-by-step journey and how it actually does that. So the first step is onboard that data. So I talked before about how difficult it is to get data together within a single organization already, because it's in so many different formats. So in the most simple sense, you can give access to your data to the Nuklai network, where Nuklai is learning what that data is just from its metadata. So it doesn't move that data physically from your servers to the Nuklai servers or any other kind of infrastructure or cloud or whatever. It just ingests the metadata understands that data, and from the context of knowing what kind of data source or data storage system it's stored in, it can understand on how to translate that data when it's queried into one generic format, the Nuklai format, so to speak. So if you have data from, let's say, a CSV file, data from a MySQL database, and data from a NoSQL database, they're all in entirely different formats. So you will have to normally build connectors to be able to get that data into one view if you want to combine that data together from these three sources. So with the Nuklai data access layer, you onboard all three of these different data sources into one go and make sure that when you want to access that data, you can just write one query and all that data is accessed in the same way. But the data access layer then translates that data just in time when that data is pulled from the sources into that generic format. And second step is if you want to actually utilize the data that you onboarded, that you queried, you need to contextualize it. And contextualization is essentially adding more information to that raw data. And with proper contextualization, you can you can learn a lot about that data just from reading that metadata. So you don't necessarily have to see the data itself in order to understand what the data is about. And to give you a very concrete example, we spoke to a lot of companies in supply chain, or that dealing with supply chain issues, that, for example, have two databases with the same part, like a screw, for example. And in one database, it has the internal part number of the screw, and in another database, it has the part number of the supplier of that screw. So it's the same part, but they're identified in a different way. So it's hard to find a combination to bring those records of that one screw together, because there is missing information to bridge those records. And through metadata, we can add that kind of context, like how can you translate that part number, internal part number, to a supplier's part number, and then find that combination between that data without having that literal shared data point. So contextualization of data is very important to start having that proper overview, proper combination of data, so that in step 3, you can start finding out what kind of data I can bring together and make one data source bigger with all the other data sources that I have as well. And that's very important, that besides that internal data that you have from within your organization, that you can also combine data from data vendors or data providers that are from maybe even completely different industries that sell or provide their data to the public Nuklai marketplace. So it can become very quickly very interesting, where you have your private internal data and you want to enrich it with market data from digital assets or weather data or traffic data that's publicly sold within the Nuklai ecosystem. And the kicker is, if you want to use that data to combine with your own data, because it's on the Nuklai ecosystem, that data is in exactly that same generic format as that your data was converted to automatically as well. And you have that same kind of metadata through that contextualization. So you don't have to think like, okay, I have my data now finally in a nice overview. I'm ready to start innovation. I just need that data from that market data from another provider. Now, oh no, and now I have to build a connector or adapter in order to interface with that data. So that's very important for us. Like, you can go through that journey without having massive investments, because everything is ready to go, right? And then for step 4, we allow to build extensive workflows or pipelines where you can actually do something with the data. Once you have contextualized data and you want to say, for example, you want to use that to train an AI model, then you can tap into the ecosystem of Nuklai, where you have the distributed a cluster execution network of clusters, which I mentioned prior, where each cluster is highly specialized in doing something specific. So one cluster can be, for example, be optimized for providing distributed GPU power. Another cluster has capabilities for specific kind of data transformation or data ingestion or data storage, even distributed data storage. And by building these extensive pipelines that automatically can determine which cluster is needed in order to execute tasks on this pipeline, you will have complete end-to-end infrastructure to actually do something with that data. And having the tools to have the right data governance of your data to be able to determine who potentially on which data points specifically can have access, you can start collaboration on your own data. So if you have a partner in supply chain or maybe even competitor where you want to collaborate on your data or monetize your data, you can easily do that on a Nuklai platform while retaining complete governance and ownership of your data. So through these 5 steps, the Nuklai infrastructure can take you through the complete journey of data innovation, right? So I spoke a little bit about the distributed execution network, and it's maybe good to take a step back about, what kind of technology are we really building here? Like everything seems very theoretic so far, right? So we are building a layer 1 blockchain network, and we are doing something special in the sense that we are not creating another Ethereum clone, another EVM network. We are building something really, really novel, right? That is highly specialized for data infrastructure needs. And what that means concretely is all the services that you typically use in a cloud are available in a distributed way. So see Nuklai as a virtual, decentralized, less distributed cloud environment where it's completely focused on everything around data. And we are doing that by building 2 blockchain networks, where one network is the orchestration network. It's a completely decentralized network that receives workflows or tasks that need to be executed. And then from that orchestration network, it communicates with the distributed execution network that are clusters of servers or nodes that can do something specific, and where each node is an shell, a framework in which any type of service can be integrated. So any third-party builder, any existing organization can integrate their own service in some kind of execution, distributed execution cluster, so that when the orchestration layer receives tasks, it can determine what it needs to do. So if it's ingesting data, it will call the data ingestion service, in which, for example, it can run a Dremio instance and manage that. When that data needs to be used for AI model training, it can communicate with the distributed GPU power network, where partners like IONET, GPUNet provide their distributed GPUs through the Nuklai network, and so on and so on. So this allows the kind of agnostic against any kind of service from our perspective, so that you have true end-to-end infrastructure that can be used for any type of innovation, any type of AI model integration, whether it's LLMs or an AI that's optimizing supply chain processes, right? So I wanted to also take a moment to explain a little bit more about smart data, because we speak from Nuklai's perspective, we speak a lot about smart data because everything around data inside of our ecosystem, we find it very important to make it smart. And smart data is essentially contextualized data, like I explained before, where you add information to that data to make it to make it smart data. And that happens through metadata. And to give you a super simple example, metadata is when you have your spreadsheet, for example, an Excel spreadsheet, you have rows and columns, and then you have the first row that is it's your column names, right? So that's your metadata. It tells you something about that data below, but it doesn't tell you a lot. You can make assumptions based on these column names, but you cannot really deeply understand that data. So for us, deeper contextualization of data is adding more information to that first row about that data below. So you can, for example, add ranges, descriptions, limitations, exceptions, translations, enumerations. You can go very deep and go very, very, very detailed on explaining that data below, which also can lead to automated annotation for the data or labeling of that data so that it can be more easily leveraged for AI model training. And another very concrete example, as you can see here on this slide, is if you look at smart data as a Wikipedia page, you could say that the raw data, the not contextualized data, would be the sources, which is what you see on the left. And the sources is very structured. It's just a bunch of numbers and a bunch of titles with potentially a link so that you can read more about that source. And that's just raw data. With that information, you don't necessarily know a lot. And everything above the sources, which is the Wikipedia article itself, it's contextualization in this context, meaning it takes the data from the sources and explains how to interpret it. So it gives you some summary, some further explanations so that you understand what you're reading without having to click on every single source to get an idea on how to understand the topic that you're reading about. So it's kind of, yeah, an analogy of how you can understand smart data and why it's so important, because through smart data, you can find the combinations between different data sets for completely different industries, because you can find, you might not find an overlap in different data sets between the literal data that's inside, but you can find the overlap in the context. So when it's describing the same topic, you can start finding, okay, then I see that there is an overlap in topics, so I can start combining that data. So that's why smart data is very, very important. So two use cases I will go over very quickly because I know that time is starting to run out. First use case, it's private computing, and I know that we spoke to a couple of companies in the beverage industry that have data that they want to pull together with data from other organizations, competitors, in order to have better results with AI models that they're creating. But no company out there wants to give data to the competitor in order to get data from that competitor back, because then they will see each other's data. But they know that it would be better off if they can use each other's data for their own AI models. So one of the distributed clusters that is available inside of the Nuklai network is a private computing cluster where this data can be pulled together and no one can access that data. And then curated AI models from which they know what kind of data they access, what kind of data they unlock in the end. These curated models can run on top of that data without ever revealing that raw data itself. So this can lead to a lot of interesting use cases also around financial data, healthcare data, where innovation can happen through collaboration because that data stays private and remains unaccessed by anyone. Another use case is in the IoT. I think there are a lot of opportunities in the IoT because if you really think about it, IoT is all about data because you have a device with a sensor and a SIM card that connects to the internet. And what can it do? Only transmit data essentially. And the data, whether it's coming from a sensor or some devices attached to it, it is data. And within some really interesting use case that we've been working on in the last couple of months is around ensuring that data that's being generated by or transmitted by an IoT device, that when it arrives on a server or a partner, that we can be 100% sure that that data arrived in the first place, that that data arrived completely, so that it wasn't tampered with or that data didn't get lost because of poor internet connections. And that's why through the Nuklai ecosystem, you have by default data that is added to existing data sets or data storage. It's coupled with hashes or with signatures so that this data can be at any time verified that you receive the right data and wasn't tampered with, which can be, for example, very important for insurance purposes, for transport of food, where you need to be sure that the temperature never was below or above a certain threshold. So these kind of use cases work out of the box in the Nuklai infrastructure. It makes sense to have this kind of decentralized way of going about it because having that signature, that hash of each transaction stored on chain ensures that no one can tamper it with because it's immutable, right? So yeah, we don't do all of this alone. We work through a network of partners, integration partners, data partners that provide their own data on the ecosystem, and implementation partners that leverage our infrastructure to actually build projects at clients. Yeah, and that's it for me for now. I can imagine that there are some questions. I will be super happy to start answering them now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matthijs, for your very insightful presentation about the importance of smart data. I'm Diana. I'm head of research and sustainability at GBBC, and we're going to take questions where we already have a number. Let's start with a question we've got during the presentation from our very Sandra. The importance of data, the challenge of non-standardized data. What has been your experience in specific with corporates, and what are your concerns about a third party coming in and having access to sensitive data? Security risk concerns, security standards, etc. Anything you'd like to comment on?
Absolutely, yeah, very happy to. My first, maybe I have a first question to you. Am I still visible?
You are, but your video froze.
Oh,
We
this is
see
weird.
a frozen image of you, but we hear you.
Yeah, so it's just stopped working for some reason. Yeah, okay. Let me start answering the question while stop working with a solution. So when
There you are,
you
you're back.
there I am. Yes, there I am.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
So
thank you once again. Great
I
presentation.
I think the most important part of the of that question was around third-party access of data, right? And
Mhm.
I think it's very important to understand that data itself is not stored inside of Nuklai. Nuklai is a virtual layer, right? So you cannot store data in it, meaning that you don't store data on chain. You store meta information of that data on chain, which are the signatures, the hashes, transaction IDs, submission IDs, who has governance over that data, etc. It decides on what kind of how the revenue processes, who has a right to take part of that revenue. So that data remains on chain remains on premise. That data remains on premise, sorry. And when you have that data and you want to provide it to third parties, to partners or clients, you can, at the data point level, so per data point, you can determine who has access, or you can even say on an industry level or geographical level who has access to that data. So, for example, you could say, I want my data to be able to be free for purchase for anyone inside of the European Union, or even more fine granularly, I want anyone that's in the automotive industry inside of the European Union to access my data or be able to purchase my data. So you have that full access control. So yeah, worry about third-party access, well, that is in your control.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Next question from someone trying to understand the fundamentals of smart data. Is the metadata that is added to turn raw data into smart data always qualitative and not quantitative in nature? Or is it always descriptions in words rather than, so it's descriptions rather than words? Descriptions in words rather than numbers. Apologies.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it's descriptive mostly, but we allow different versions of metadata for one data set. And what I mean by that is you can have metadata that's optimized for human readability. So it's for a data scientist to understand the data deeply before it gets started with it, right? But it can also be optimized for LLM integration so that a large language model can learn your data set with prompts engineered to have a better understanding. Close to human readability, I guess, but more optimized for a specific use case. It can also be very technical, adhering to industry standards. And metadata in our smart data ecosystem, it's not necessarily descriptive only. Like when I come back to, like some really concrete example is around colors. Like if you have colors, you can have colors in many different ways. You can have it in RGB notation, you can have it in a hexagonal notation. So it's exactly the same color, but in it's noted in different ways. Like the color red, it's FF0000 or 25500. It's exactly the same shade of red. There is no discussion about it, but it's completely differently written. So how can you combine data from two different data sources together, where one is in hex and one is in RGB? And through the metadata, you can put kind of translations or kind of really simple functions where that data is translated into a different format so that it can be interpreted by many different ways. So you have a descriptive way, yes, but you also have a more technical way to describe that metadata.
Fascinating. Wow. Next question, which we received a few questions ahead of time from the registrants. With so many blockchain companies, how do we create a central repository of data that can be a source for smart data worldwide?
Yeah, so I think it's a valid question, and I don't think that we. Okay, yeah, so I do think we need a central repository. And I do believe that what we're doing with Nuklai is setting that first step, because a central repository means standardization, generalization, and having an agnostic stance instead of bringing a new standard to the table you need to embrace all the standards that are already there. That's why we found it super important that with the data access layer that we've built, that we can onboard all that different data without having to relocate that data to new servers. And through the distributed cluster execution network, that you have that power to run a service from any other kind of blockchain network or blockchain project without having to reinvent the wheel all the time, because distributed GPU power is very important in some of the use cases that run on top of Nuklai. But we don't want to be the hundreds distributed GPU provider solution, because there are already so many out there and they are very successful. So we believe in integration and collaboration. So in order to have this central repository of data, I think the setup of the Nuklai infrastructure is the only way to get there, being agnostic and being integratable for anyone, essentially.
Right, right. The importance to be able to work across different platforms is something that you're implying. Next question. Are there any examples of projects where the key focus was provenance of data?
Yeah. So I think that's essentially almost everywhere. And I think the example I gave earlier with the screw, with having availability in different data sources in different ways, shows how important it is to annotate everything well and to have that overview that is otherwise so hard to get. So I think every enterprise struggle with this. And that's why it's so important to take this infrastructure as a step-by-step solution, instead of focusing on one step and do that like many other companies are doing, only data availability or only data ingestion or only AI model training. You need to have that step-by-step kind of solution.
Excellent. I'll move to the next question. What are the associated costs for a business in making data smart? These are very good questions.
Absolutely. I see my screen is my image is frozen again, isn't it?
Yeah, same thing. I was literally messaging you
Yeah,
directly.
this is so weird.
I can
Yeah,
still hear you. We can keep talking, but if you want
yeah.
to,
Ah,
exactly.
great.
There you go.
Okay,
You're back.
perfect. Okay, but let's just switch it off and on. Sometimes, like all the
Mhm.
problems in IT are solved, right?
Yeah, you know
Uh,
what to do.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is a very hard question because there is no one like you onboard data and it costs X. You have the public data ecosystem, and onboarding data to that, it's well, it costs cents. And then using that public infrastructure in order to get started with contextualization, collaboration with others, again, it's mere cents. So it's very, very cheap. It costs you your time and your efforts. You essentially only pay for transactions on the network, and that's it. Now, I do understand that for many organizations, they are not going to want to onboard their private or most valuable data, which is sometimes like their gold, to a public decentralized network, where I can imagine that you have a lot of fear, like what's going to happen to the data out there? Who can access it? Do I still have like all that control? And for some organizations, they don't even have the need to go to a public network. They just want to have a better overview of their data internally. So in that case, we provide subnets, private subnets of the Nuklai network, where you can run a couple of nodes internally or share it with partners in a distributed network, where that data remains completely private. And then the costs are associated with license costs for running the nodes and maintaining that, the server costs for running those nodes.
Great. What unique advantages does blockchain technology bring to data markets that are not possible with more traditional centralized technologies?
Yeah, that's actually a very important question, and it's twofold. One is, like I mentioned before, it has an immutable record of what took place. So if we look at the example of OpenAI using data from New York Times to train their models, if an AI company would use data from the Nuklai's ecosystem to train their models, they will have to pay for the data. There is no way around it. And that is tracked, it's transparent. Everyone that had a role in making that data more valuable will get a piece of that pie. And that's like arranged programmatically in blockchain, right? So you cannot do that differently. No one can step in and say, like, I want to use that data. I'm not going to reward anyone for it. So that's very important. And second, is when you have multiple enterprises working together, building a platform or building out a use case to explore new business models, and they have to collaborate on data in order to get there. The question is, who is going to run that infrastructure? And usually they bring in like a third party, like Cognizant, Capgemini, like a large consultancy firm that's going to build that infrastructure, is going to take care of all the interfacing, and it's going to cost tens, if not hundreds of millions in order to build all of that. And then you have to just trust that that consultancy firm is going to do the right thing with the data that you bring in. And we believe that there is a better way through having this decentralized orchestration layer that doesn't require a additional infrastructure cloud environment to be deployed. You also don't have to question who is responsible for this, because everyone is equally responsible for this, and everyone equally cannot access just each other's data. You cannot have an access key leaking to a data source because somebody was uncareful with it. So it's a very, I would say, it's a very organic need to have infrastructure like that that's decentralized, but in the right ways. Not everything is decentralized in the Nuklai ecosystem. Data storage, highly centralized because it remains on-premise with organization. And even the execution that takes place on the network happens in distributed clusters with just the right amount of nodes to guarantee that the task can be completed efficiently, but also can be trusted that the work was valid.
Thank you so much for all these insights. I'll take one more question, and it has to do with AI capabilities. We are very interested in the intersection and the convergence of blockchain and AI. How are you different comparatively to current AI market leaders in the crypto industry?
Yeah. So I think what set us apart is we are not necessarily a better execution provider. Like there are largely, I think, two ecosystems out there. One is around providing distributed hardware to develop AI easier, more cheaply. And another is around decentralizing the models, in a sense that you create a model, you put it on chain, like on a BitTensor subnet, and you can validate that the work is consistent and valid, and that there is a fair kind of business model around it. But what none of the solutions out there really focus on is on having that data in the first place, and to be able to get that data to a level that is useful at all. And for me, it all starts with data. Like they say, data is the new oil and stuff, but data isn't the new oil anymore. That's all. Data is the new oxygen, because without data, we cannot live anymore. As none as an economy. We need data to thrive. We need data to do anything, and we generate it every day with whatever we do. So having proper focus on actual problems that we have as organizations when it comes to data, before we can use that data for any type of innovation, we need to solve those problems first in a step-by-step way, and then we can integrate those industry giants that do already well, like BitTensor. We don't have to compete or work against BitTensor. We can integrate a subnet as a cluster inside of the Nuklai network, as an example.
Excellent. I wish we had more time. This is so interesting, and it's such an important topic because In so many ways, blockchain is a record of data. It's all about the data, and the quality of data that you're ensuring is really, really fantastic. Thank you so much, Matthijs and Nuklai, for joining us today. And it's been a thoughtful, engaging presentation, Q&A, a lot of questions on the importance of smart data, what it is, why we need it, and all the opportunities ahead. We look forward to learning more about Nuklai's progress, and we wish you the best. A recording of this presentation will be circulated to all those who have registered and shared publicly on GBBC's YouTube channel. Thank you so much. We'll end it here and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.